Hello everybody, this is Freddy with FreddyCanFly, and in today's video, I was sitting in the house feeling a little bored, so I thought, hey, let's practice some auto rotations, maybe turn it into a little bit of a lesson. I am still working out the new additions to the Freddys Flight Academy. Just to kind of kick it off, guys, I don't want to make this anything about, beginner to intermediate to advanced. I will say this, though. I do get asked a pretty generic question by a lot of different pilots out there, and they always ask me, how did you learn how to do auto rotations? And it's a very hard question to answer. For those of you out there who are brave enough to hit throttle hold and do autos, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But basically, I wouldn't recommend getting into auto rotations until you are completely comfortable flying your machine. They have become a pretty popular aspect of the sport. They add a lot of characteristics and a lot of dynamics to your flights. And I don't care how hard you fly 3D, nothing gets your heart pumping as hard as hitting that throttle hold and hitting that 50-50 chance, right? Either my machine's coming down alive or it's coming down and hitting the ground and turning into pieces. So, anyways, so what I kind of started out with when I got into auto rotations, of course, I was, pretty good at my 3D flying and everything. I was pretty comfortable with all my inverted stuff. But for some reason, the thought of taking my machine up in the air and just killing the power, it freaked me out. Now, I came back from an era, if you will, in RCLEs where we had 5-foot-long FM transmitters, wooden blades. We had fly bars. We didn't have bailout features or auto rotation saves or self-leveling or anything like that. It's either you nailed it or you didn't. And so that was another thing too. Parts weren't as easily accessible back then. So you crash your machine practicing your first auto, you might be out for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. It all depends. So what I did, kind of a step-to-step guide on how I started learning my auto rotations. And if you guys have seen my older video in Freddys Flight Academy, I do have a video demonstrating the auto rotation method that I use. And instead of making it geeky and nerdy and using all the crazy terms that some people may not understand, I like to use the bank account method, if you will. So I like to refer to my RPMs as a bank account, a savings account, if you will. And essentially the goal to a successful auto rotation is going to be a matter of checks and balances. And we'll get into that in just a quick moment. So let's look at this real quick. So the first step to warming up into auto rotations that I found worked the best is what I call floating autos. Floating autos require very little momentum. They don't require a lot of collective readjustment, and you really don't have to monitor the RPMs as much. I'd say anywhere between maybe 5 to 10 feet is safe to do a floating auto. But what I would usually do starting out, so I'm flying my helicopter, I'm doing my whole song and dance, and when I bring it in for a landing, all I would do is bring it in, and I would just tap my throttle hold and just land like you normally would. Just tap it, and you literally just apply a little bit of positive, float it down, set it down. Easy, right? You don't have to worry about applying any negative or getting into any of the difficult areas, but literally just at any time, keep your heli nice and low, just float it down and just feel how that RPM starts to drop. And you'll notice that the more positive you apply, it seems as though the faster the helicopter falls. And that's because you're spending up all the energy, right? You're spending all the money in the bank. And what you necessarily want, what you more or less are looking for with float down autos from a low distance is keeping it closer to that 0 to maybe plus 3 to 4 positive range, and you'll see that the machine will just float right down and land nice and soft relatively. So float down autos were what got me used to hitting that throttle hold switch. It got rid of a lot of the tension I had, a lot of the fear that I had of just hitting that switch in general, right? Even if it was an emergency or not. And then after that, I kind of got into momentum-based ones where, I'd kind of come in like this, and I would just hit it. And I'm still basically just kind of doing a float-down auto, barely applying any collective, and just seeing how it sits down. That one was a little rough. But I basically tried avoiding the negative aspect of the auto rotation until I understood the more positive range of it. So again, you know, you're just coming in for a landing. Instead of bringing it in all dramatic, just hit your throttle hold, float it down, and just find that sweet spot, you know. And once I got comfortable with that, I kind of got bored. I wouldn't say bored. I'd say a little more intrigued, if you will. And I started asking myself, okay, so how do people pull off them big autos? So I know how to float the machine down, but what if I want to take it up really, really high and throw out, you know, one of those really crazy autos I see all the professional pilots doing? And I didn't really know where to start. So of course I did research and I started looking up, you know, positive and negative collective and all that stuff. So the next step after practicing your float down autos, I would say is doing a high altitude floating auto. And what I mean by that is, instead of taking it, you know, maybe 5 to 10 feet, is let's take it up really high in the sky. But let's leave it stationary. And by stationary, I mean we're not traveling necessarily. You know, we're not doing any hurricanes or anything. And basically from here, what we're going to do is we're going to hit throttle hold, and the machine's going to start to descend. Now realize at this point, your cyclic is going to start to provide propulsion on the main rotor disc as you fall. Think of it like a fan. Like if you blow into a fan with your lips, the fan moves, right? So the auto rotation is the same thing. As you fall, you apply a little bit of negative collective onto that main rotor disc. And by little, I mean anywhere between -1 to maybe -4. It depends on what your maneuver is. But what you're trying to do is, as you fall, you're adding that wind effect to generate more RPMs onto the main rotor. And take in mind, this is a collective pitch machine, so both your cyclic and your collective responses are going to add and subtract RPMs from the rotor. So let's go back to that bank account method we talked about, right? We've got a savings account. Our RPMs are going to be translated into our money, if you will. And as soon as we hit throttle hold, that's the cap. That's the limit on our bank account. So right now, what I want to try to do is I want to save as much money as possible and spend it all at the end. But I don't want to spend so much money that I don't have any left when I land. So essentially what I'm saying is you want to have enough money in the bank when you land that you're not stalling the main rotor or running out of RPM. So we're up here, we're kind of stationary hover, right? Let's hit our throttle hold. We're going to go into about a 0 to -1 and use that cyclic, and you'll see that you can just kind of guide the machine down. Give a little negative if you need to. But we want to listen for that right there. See that? We had plenty of money left to spend, plenty of RPMs left. So if we had to do a drastic bailout or something, we could. Now, if we run out of money, we run out of RPMs, it's over. I mean, the machine's dropping. And that's to assume that we're not using an auto rotation bailout feature, of course, right? So let's go to this side. Let's do the same thing. I practiced my floating autos, and let's go a little bit higher on this one. These are much harder to do than any traveling auto, guys. I promise you this, because it takes so much more skill and you're attentive to every move. So we're going to hit our throttle hold. Right now I'm sitting at, it's kind of hard on the sim too because it kind of travels above you sometimes, but I'm sitting at about, I'd say maybe like a -1, possibly -2, but I'm using the cyclic to maneuver the heli. If I need more speed, I can give a quick negative, bring it up a little bit. You listen. Boom. You can hear how much head speed we still have in there, right? Plenty of money in the bank. Didn't overspend. So that's where I recommend starting. Forgive me on that one. That one was a little sloppy. Like I said, on the simulator, it's kind of hard to judge with it doing the whole panoramic scheme. But let's try one more, right? Let's take it straight up. Stationary. I always like to go nose in. Whatever makes you feel good works. And let's cap throttle hold. Now this one I kind of had a little bit of forward, so I'm going to bring her back a little. There we go. Start to apply your positive. Bring it down nice and soft. Plenty of money left in the bank. See that? Perfect. So once you get the concept of the float down auto, I feel like then you have a good idea of what it's like from that positive and negative range. Of course, if you are right side up, negative is going to be your best friend as far as adding some additional money to the bank. Of course, if you're inverted, right, things get ass backwards at that point, because then positive is now going to add money to your bank, whereas when you're inverted, negative is going to lift you up, right? So we'll worry about the inverted autos at a later time, but now what we can do is we can look into getting some actual like momentum-based autos, some fast ones, the cool ones, all the ones you see the professionals do and things like that. So the way I usually started with those once I got comfortable is I did stall turns. I'm a lefty in real life, so I always fly to the left. It's just my comfort zone. But I'd go out, bring the machine up, right, stall it out, get that tail in, and then I would just click my throttle hold. Same thing though, now we're falling with a little bit more purpose, so we're gonna have to be a little bit more aggressive. Oh, there we go, and land her down. Now, when you're doing auto rotations that have a lot more force, a lot more momentum behind them like that, you're gonna want to start to learn what's called a flare. And basically, what a flare is it's a maneuver that kind of, for lack of a better word, it like supercharges the main rotor. So as you're falling and descending, you're spending your money, but at the end you hit a payday, right? A bonus. And a flare is basically like a pullback and a negative, and it stops you just like that. Like, see how easily I was able to stop? Let's try that one more time. So the flare is like a hard pullback on the aileron or elevator, depending on what direction you're coming in. And you give a negative or an opposite collective, and it's gonna, the force or the inertia of that's gonna stop the machine. So we're coming in, right? You wanna stop like that, boom. That's what a flare is, but you're doing that opposite because you're doing an auto rotation, and it's gonna supercharge that main rotor and give you enough to counterbalance how fast the machine is falling, and also the weight of the machine too. So let's try to make that make sense. So let's go in, let's try to pull an auto here. We'll go out, get some good altitude, hit that stall turn, and we're going to come in with some speed, hit that throttle hold. Now as we're coming in, watch, we're going to do that flare and give that pullback and that negative. Boom. And it's just going to give us just enough, land down nice and soft. Now the flare is gonna drastically change depending on the maneuver that you're doing. I mean, if you're coming in hot, really, really fast, I mean, that's going to change. If you're coming in nice and soft, you may not need a flare at all. It's all going to depend on what you guys are doing, so keep that in mind. But typically, any momentum-based auto rotation where you're coming in with speed, you're going to flare it a little bit. So let's hit another one here. Coming in, gathering that speed. I'm coming in really fast. Flare it. Boom. Gives me just enough. Land it down soft, right? And that's kind of the next step right there, guys, is, again, I always like coming in, nose in, whatever you're comfortable with. I mean, you can do tail-in ones. Forgive me real quick. I got to crash the model because I'm almost out of the battery life on here, so it's gonna reset on me. So there we go. Just keep that in mind, guys. I mean, you can do tail-in, side-in, whatever it is that makes you feel good. Like, let's try a tail-in one. We'll kind of come out this way a little bit. Tail-in ones for me are probably a little sketchy, but let's give it a go. So we'll kind of just stall it. Get that speed built up. Okay, we hit that hold. Now this one's going to be hard. I have to flare that one really hard. Yeah, I came in a little fast on that one, but you can still hear plenty of money in the bank to set it down. Other variations of auto rotations you guys can play with is, I don't know, let's go into like a nice little hurricane, right? And as we come out, let's hit our auto as we come around this bend and try to get that kind of crowd pleaser effect, right? So we're coming around, flying our machine, and we're coming in for our landing. Here comes the runway. Hit our throttle hold. And this one doesn't really need much of a flare, just easy. Boom. Nice and easy land. See, that one took barely any effort at all. Nice and simple, nice and easy. We can try things like taking it up really high. Those are the hardest ones, guys, especially on the sim. I mean, in real life, your model does start to lose sight as it gets higher, but on the sim it gets kind of hard because you're looking at a computer screen. But let's try a really high one here. See if I can bring her home safe. And you'll notice that sometimes you got to give some serious negative to get you where you need to be. Here we go. This is going to be a hard flare. See, boom. You can flare it. Plenty left. Boom. Right there. Easy peasy. Take in mind, guys, auto rotations are not only fun, I feel like they're mandatory because I feel like in every pilot's flying career, if you will, there will be a time where an auto rotation is going to be the difference between a $0 crash, a $1,000 crash, a $50 crash. It doesn't matter. Accidents happen. Mechanical failures are always prone to happen. And that auto rotation ability is something you need to know. And you need to be able to do it on a dime, you know. Because even then, if you're flying in front of a crowd, you know, and that machine goes crazy, you need to be able to land it and land it quick. So one thing I used to practice a lot is I just kind of 3D fly, or, you know, F3C fly, however you guys like to fly. But I would just fly around and I would just kind of switch my mind off for a minute, and I would hit throttle hold randomly for no reason at all. And just kind of surprise even myself, and just kind of see, whoa, what if that happened in real life? And I try bringing it down. Boom. Boom. There's a kick out there. So I just fly around, do all my things. Whoop, throttle hold. And bring her down. And I would do that all the time. Actually, believe it or not, guys, I'm sorry I can't provide a live demonstration right now. Where I'm at, it's rainy and muggy out. That's why we're hitting the sim today. But I would do that in real life, too. I used to hit throttle hold triggers all the time, just for fun. I did not do it with my most prized possession helicopter, of course, but I would do it with one of my little beaters or something and just kind of play around with it that way. And just kind of see what would happen, you know, like in the event something fails, am I going to be able to save it? And sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. But that's the difference there, is always be ready for it, and having that mindset of how the auto rotation works and how it feels is going to be a big deal. Last but not least, too, one of my favorites, guys, and take in mind you got to have the right set of skids for this and the right kind of a landing environment, but sliding auto rotations. I have a few videos where I've done some of these on my YouTube channel, but they are absolutely amazing but terrifying to do. But so if you come in really hot like this, right, get a lot of speed, and you can get that, you're basically going to kind of skip the flare a little bit and just try to set her down and just slide it. Boom. Those are so much fun when you do them in real life. Me and my buddies used to try to do like slide offs, you know, and see who could slide the farthest. And sometimes you hit a rock, sometimes you hit a crack, and sometimes you were completely successful. But either way, it was a lot of fun. So as far as auto rotations are concerned, guys, I hope that really helps. I get asked about auto rotations a lot, and it's one of those things. I mean, you can try to teach it. Of course, live demonstrations always work a lot better, but it's just a simple concept, guys. You guys just you pay attention to the RPMs of the main rotor. Remember, as you descend, negative is going to help charge the main rotor. And you just want to make sure that you make minimal adjustments until you're ready to land. If you've got too much speed on that main rotor, too much speed on the machine itself, do not forget to do that flare, guys. An exercise I would highly encourage you to practice all the time. Come from left, come from right, any direction that you choose. And just practice coming in with a lot of speed. Come in really fast. And just try to stop that heli as quickly as you can, right? Get that flare in there. Boom, stop it. That right there is going to be your auto rotation best friend. So, overall, guys, I just wanted to do this quick video on auto rotations. Thanks for joining in with me. If you guys have any questions, leave them down below. As always, guys, thank you so very much for supporting me. Thank you for watching. Remember, my friends, if Freddy can fly, so can you. I'll see you on the next video.